I analyzed every Billboard hit over the last 35 years. That's 3,054 songs. And in this video, I wanted to explore the question, is there a difference between the #1 hits and everything else? Is there a pattern that they are doing that the others simply aren't? After diving into the data, I can say that it's not tempo or EQ or song structure. But what it is a little bit weirder. Let's go into the first thing that I checked between #1s and the rest. And that was keys. Seems like every producer has a favorite key. Produce in A flat and your bass is guaranteed to come out on subsystems. Or produce in F and you're guaranteed to hit the perfect vocal range for males. I've heard a lot of things before and I'm here to see if there's any validity to that. Songs that charted 2 and below were 63% major and 37% minor, whereas #1 songs were 65% major and 35% minor. Pretty much exactly the same. A key does not make a good song. So then after looking at keys, I looked at the tempo of a song. The median for #1 songs was 117 BPM. The median for non-hits was 120 BPM. 3 BPM different. Pretty much nothing. Take a look at these songs. All of them are exactly 120 beats per minute. Tempo was not the deciding factor in whether or not these were hits. So fine, not keys, not tempo, but what about structure? Is there a certain structure that hit songs follow that make them more listenable? I feel like a lot of people like to say hits are catchier and shorter, but is that true? And according to the data, no. A song that peaks at #1 and a song that peaks at #12 generally have the same skeleton. You could have something like Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us, or you could have something like Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You. Both peaked at #1. Now we're getting into the spice of the spice market. This is definitely something that on YouTube gets thrown around like it's a hot potato. I need a better analogy there, but it's EQ. Everyone loves to say, put the highs up, do this, do that. I even made a video showing the hit vocal EQ curve. But is there a pattern? Does EQ determine if your song is going to be #1 or not? And the answer is no. Take a look at how closely these interplay with each other. The mix EQ curve of the hits versus the mix EQ curve of non-#1 songs. They are almost identical. If you have a good mix, that's pretty much the prerequisite. Now keep in mind that I'm comparing hit songs in general. All these songs are pretty well mixed. They were all successful in their own rights. I'm just comparing the #1s to the rest of the pack of these 3,000 plus hit songs. It was about this point that I was like, you know what? I thought I had a video here. I thought the data was going to say something interesting that I could talk about, but I just wasn't finding it. Then I found this. I stopped comparing the #1s to the rest of the tracks, and I decided to split them by decade. 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. In the 1990s, the #1s and the rest of the songs were pretty much identical in every metric, just like I showed you before. The vocal dynamic range was 37.7 decibels for #1s. For the rest, it was 37.7 decibels. The exact same number to the decimal. That is how close these were. The word count was the same. Profanity. Actually, #1s had slightly less than the rest, but not enough to make that big of a difference. If you were an alien visiting Earth and you'd never heard these songs, and I played them both back to back, there is not a single shot you'd be able to distinguish what a #1 was from a non-#1. But I will say that once you move past the 1990s and move into the 2020s, that's where things get interesting. Check out this graph, which kind of visualizes what I found. Every single yellow dot is a hit, and every single gray dot is a non-hit. This specifically is talking about vocal compression. You can see, starting around 2012, something happens where the vocals get slightly more compressed than their non-hit counterparts. This trend continues, and by the time you get to 2024, you can see that the #1 hits have significantly less dynamic range in their vocals than the non-hits. Here's some songs that exemplify that example. We've been talking about I Will Always Love You, so let's pull that song up. This song has 58 decibels of dynamic range. That is a very large gap to have. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, we have something like Doja Cat's Paint the Town Red, which has 8.8 decibels of dynamic range. Her waveform probably just, it's like a straight rectangle at this point. And it's not just Doja. Check out these other songs that you might recognize. Ton of modern #1s just smashed flat. Now, my initial thought was that this was happening because of rap's takeover of modern number ones. In 1990s, rap just wasn't as popular, but as it became more popular, the compressed sound that comes with its vocals and the really loud mixes all dragged this down. That's what I thought. But I actually ran the analysis again with rap and R&B removed, and the findings got stronger. Or in other words, the other genres were more greatly affecting this change than rap and R&B were, with the biggest genre being country getting significantly more compressed. In the 90s, on average, country had 56 decibels of vocal dynamic range. Today, it has on average 21 decibels of vocal dynamic range. The same story is true of in Latin, of in pop, and even Christian and gospel. The only one that is an exception to this is hip hop, because when hip hop first started, the vocals were already squashed super loud. One more thing while we're on the mix, it's not just compression that has this trend. Modern number ones are slightly more mono than their non-hit counterparts. Check it out from this graph here. It's basically a measure of how mono something is. This has to do with phase. You can see it a little bit better in this graph right here. The outside being non-hits and the inside being the hits. Just like the 90s, this gap didn't really exist at all. The non-hits and the hits were exactly the same. But in today's era, this is true. It seems like the vocals are more compressed and the mixes are slightly more mono compatible. But vocals weren't the only thing that I checked. I also checked lyrics. In the 90s, like you can guess, number ones and non-hits basically had the same average word count per songs, which happened to be around 320. But by the 2020s, number one started packing in about 14% more words than non-hit songs. And just like before, I thought that this might be the case because hip hop was getting more popular and it generally has more words. So I ran the analysis again with hip hop and R&B excluded. And yes, the data still held true. Every genre was continuing to get wordier, not just hip hop and R&B. This last one was kind of a funny one, but I wanted to analyze the profanity in hit songs. Sure enough, there is a trend that I thought was worth sharing. For 3 straight decades, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s, number one hit songs had less profanity than non-hits. However, 2020s, that completely flipped upside down. Back in the day, it was like being clean was considered the winning strategy. Whitney Houston, Boyz II Men, Alicia Keys, Mariah Carey, not a single explicit word in their hits. And now, number one hits today have 82% more profanity than non-hits. What the fuck? Compared to the 2010s, today's hits have 4 times the amount of profanity. Look at some of these songs. Now, you're probably thinking exactly what I'm thinking. This one has to be because of hip-hop getting more popular. No, it's not. I pulled out hip-hop and R&B once again to account for that, and every single other genre is getting more profane. The data is showing that over the last 35 years, they're starting to spread out a little bit more between the number one hits and the non-hits. More narrow mixes, more compressed vocals, wordier, and more profane. That's all well and good, Mattie, but none of that will tell you actually what to do in your mix. So I kept digging, and I found the thing that most number one hits are doing today that most home producers aren't. The first finding was that hit vocals sit louder to the instrumental than non-hit vocals. In hit songs, the instrumental to vocal ratio is about negative 2.55 decibels on average, while in non-hit songs, it's around negative 3.35 decibels. This means that a vocal is louder for hit songs than non-hit songs. To give you some more context, let me show you a song that has almost exactly the same vocal level as their instrumental. This is Hello by Adele. She's just a smidge louder than the instrumental itself. Here are some of the biggest culprits that have just really loud vocals. And if you're not sure where to start with your vocal or your mix, I've actually built a free vocal analyzer where you can drop your vocal in and it will tell you how your vocal competes and compares to the rest of these hits that I've analyzed. EQ, compression stats, and even recommended signal chains that you can use and enact. Links in the description. One more thing, it's not just loudness, it's space. Basically meaning the arrangement stays out of the vocal's frequency range. You can see that in this graph here. The higher these bar charts are, the more exposed the vocals are. I think Hello is another good example of this. If you listen to the song, it's basically just low piano and her voice. There is so much room for her voice to come through and shine through because of that. Or take Bad Bunny's Dakiti. It is a super sparse arrangement where the vocal is the absolute star. And by the way, these arrangement choices are not necessarily EQ moves. You can use EQ to help carve the space, but most of these decisions are made in the arrangement phase. So after 3,054 songs later and looking at number ones, here's what I learned. For me, the trend of most of these findings come down to one thing: the vocals themselves. In my mind, the melody of a song and the vocal performance is the song itself. It is the most important thing. And if you get that right, right, it makes sense why you would want to showcase the vocal more. If I had to give a specific aesthetic to what songs have evolved into over the past 35 years, it would be that. Compressed, clear, and upfront vocals. Almost every single one of the #1 hits of the last 5 years have followed that pattern. And I imagine it'll probably continue that way until AI takes over and murders us all. This video showed us how important vocal compression is. But it's one thing to know it's important and another thing to know exactly the right settings to use. In the next video in the series, I'll show you what the data says about vocal compression and how you too can use it in your own mixes. And why you are probably overcomplicating things. Subscribe so you don't miss out.